Oregon Governor Kate Brown announced on Thursday that the state will start to reopen beginning on May 15th. Of course, that's going to be done in phases. That may not reach the phase at which it needs to host an Oregon-Ohio State game with or without fans possibly as of September. I believe the statement was also made that large gatherings won't be in play through the month of September. If I remember, I'm not going through the entire statement, but it certainly puts, Kevin, the Ohio State-Oregon game in question in terms of location and most likely without fans.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a chance to talk to our publisher up there in Eugene, and was very quick to say that it really didn't make a lot of sense for Governor Brown to come out and make the statement at this point. And it's been a lot of, she doesn't know what's going on week to week and whatnot, but it certainly doesn't bode well if this is what the norm is going to be up there in Oregon. And truthfully, Oregon, Washington, and California are all probably going to operate under a very similar playbook when it's all said and done. It does create a lot of issues of, do you sit there and have Ohio State come in, provided that we are looking at an uninterrupted season as planned, come in and play in front of 0 fans, 10,000 fans, 15,000 fans? Do you move it to a neutral site? Do you move it? Do you sit there and try and get Ohio State to flip-flop? Ohio State isn't going to want to flip-flop home and home in that type of situation. Sure, they would quote unquote get a windfall in terms of home games in 2020, but there probably is going to be some sort of limitation as to how many fans Ohio Stadium is going to be able to hold at that point too. Plus 2021 becomes a nightmare situation with Ohio State only having 4 league games at home on the 9-game rotating type of schedule. And Ohio State would open the season a week before at Minnesota. So they would start the season road. I don't see under any circumstances that Gene Smith or Ohio State, let alone Ryan Day, from a football standpoint, would agree to flipping that type of schedule. So, I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I hear some of, okay, if they flip the home games and had this year's game in Columbus or whatever, some of that is kind of that government think that you can't think outside the box on these things because, well, this year's budget says we have to have 7 home games. Next year's budget says we have to have 7 home games. Why can't we always have 7 home games? Well, this year you have 8, next year you have 6. I mean, that's just kind of bureaucratic thinking, I guess, that in a pandemic, in a totally uncharted territory, there are going to be very unorthodox solutions. And having 8 home games this year and 6 home games next year could be one of those unorthodox solutions. And I know it's not ideal. It's not what everybody would, 7 is that magic number every year for revenue purposes. And if they can get 8 in a given year, which they have had in the past with 4 home games or, all 3, well, it used to be 4 conference games and 4 non-conference games, but I don't know, they've done it 3 and 5, but any rate, they have had 8 in the past, and just the way the quirk of the schedule. So I don't look at that as an end of the world stumbling block to this. A neutral site doesn't do a whole lot for me. If you're going to that length, should the game even be played? I don't know. There's all kinds of different theories that, they're just going to play the conference games this year. They're just going to play a 9 or a 10 game schedule this year. They're going to start October the 1st and the season will run through January the 1st. And then the bowl games will be in the weeks that follow, or God only knows what people are thinking at this point. And, I think she was premature. I think she jumped the gun. I think that what she said is something that could certainly be walked back in the weeks and months that come, because she is going to be under a tremendous, if NCAA football gets green lighted in 40 to 48 states and she's the one holdout, believe me, they're going to walk that back and the game will be in Oregon. So I don't look at her saying that as the end all be all for something that is still 4 months away. I wouldn't cancel my reservation just yet, but That's kind of my overarching thought on the whole thing is let's don't assume or say anything's on the table or anything is completely out of sort and completely off the table, because these are strange and unorthodox times that we are living in, and they're going to do the best they can to preserve some type of normalcy, whatever it may be.
I was thinking, would Ohio State say you could play in Ohio? Oregon doesn't want the crowds. Can Ohio State, they pay $1 million to play Buffalo, stuff like that, where that's how much the going rate is for a lot of these games. But would they even have the budget to say, Oregon, come play here, we'll give you $1 million, but next year's game is also in Columbus? Would that be some type of a solution? But Steve talking about holdouts and stuff like that reminds me of what Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, has talked in the last week and was asked, could he foresee some conferences playing and some conferences not? And the fact that he did not say, no, I don't see that happening, means that, yes, he could see that happening, and that, yes, the Big Ten could be one of those conferences that plays, even if the Pac-10 isn't. I go back to Jim Delaney would always be very all for one for all. It has to be equal for everyone. If San Diego State's not playing, then we're not going to play. And Kevin Warren is like, I think he said something about an independent mindset type of thing. If some conferences can't play, if the Big Ten can, it sounds like the way I took it from him is that they will keep their options open, and they could play this year even if the Pac-12 can't. And does that mean no conference games or no non-conference games? Maybe. Does it mean you scramble and find another MAC team? Probably.
The way college football's been over the last several years, I think maybe just the Big Ten plays its season, the SEC plays its season, Clemson prepares for the playoff, and then we just meet with the 4 teams, and the best wild card team out of the SEC and the Big Ten gets the 4th spot, and there you go. There's your playoff.
What if Clemson and Notre Dame just play each week?
I had somebody on Twitter pose the question of, if every conference just ran through its conference schedules, we don't have a postseason or whatever, conference crowns are just as good as it goes for, would I be in favor of the Big Ten doing that? And I was like, I've done everything I can not to have to go to West Lafayette and Bloomington every other year or whatnot. I mean, that versus no football, sign me up at that point. But I don't like the thought of a conference only slate or anything along those lines. I mean, if we truly are to believe that the Big Ten and its 14 teams really only has 3 teams who legitimately each year are capable of winning the conference, I'm not that excited. I'm not going to call out certain schools just to pick on them, but I'm not excited by some of the matchups that could come out of that. But again, compared to sitting there and watching KBO baseball, all right, fine. I'll watch them.
Well, plus the issue is with the outset of the season. As this goes along, we're supposed to be improving against this pandemic, and then the addition of 3 playoff games is going to be an issue. After we can coordinate hundreds of games to be played within conferences, then we can't add the 3 playoff games that are needed to determine a national champion. That would be a problem at that point.
As Steve said, you make changes. You deal with the situation at hand. During a pandemic, you can make things work, but then it shows you that things don't have to be so rigid. And maybe they don't want to do that. They always want to be, well, we cannot do this. And then if they show that actually they can change things a little bit, that gives that shows that, well, Now we don't need to wait until the end of the current contract. We can go to 8 teams next year.